We reached the house in the woods when a man carrying firewood stopped, slandered us, and made us fear he might rob us. He just wanted to know where we were going, and we told him we were following someone that we thought had gone into that house. He told us never to go near there, that the only thing living there was a witch. Community, thank you so much for joining us this October for stories. Today with a special Halloween night episode, which we hope you really enjoy because it was prepared with a lot of love for you. We chose some of the scariest stories, the most fitting for this night, that we've received over the past few months. We sincerely wish you a happy Halloween, and don't forget to stay until the end. It's in your best interest. A very special greeting to everyone using this episode as background for their Halloween night, because you will undoubtedly be the next protagonists of night stories. I hope no one else has gone through this, but every Halloween, every witch's night, I remember what happened to me. When I was 8, I lived with my parents and older sister in a medium-sized 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. It was the end of October, right at that time when everyone already has decorations up, and the nights start to get cold when you can really feel autumn. I remember that in the nearby houses, there were witches hanging pumpkins with lights, and they had those recorded laughs that you could hear in the distance as part of the usual sounds of the season. That's why, when I heard the first laugh that night, I thought it was one of those decorations in the distance. But no, it wasn't. I have to explain to you that my sister, who was 10, wasn't in the house that night. She wasn't in our room, with me in bed in front of me. She had emergency appendix surgery, and my parents stayed at the hospital with her. They left me in the care of a neighbor, Mrs. Junie, a good woman, but already very old. She fell asleep on the couch and told me to go to bed early. I tried to do it, but the silence in the house was very strange. Everything felt different without my sister in the other bed. There was no talking, no breathing, no movement, not even that sound of the blankets when someone gets comfortable. I lay there staring at the ceiling and think I dozed off for a few minutes until something made me open my eyes. It was a very soft laugh, like from a woman or an old girl. I don't know how to explain it. It was coming from downstairs, from under my sister's bed. Initially, I thought it might be the neighbors. Maybe a recording, because back then some people would put speakers outside to play scary sounds. But the sound wasn't coming from the street. It was coming from there, from inside the room. I stayed still under the blanket. I told myself I was dreaming, that if I stayed still it would go away, but the laughter continued. It was a hoarse, dirty laugh, as if the throat of whoever was laughing was full of dust. Then I heard something like it scraped the floor, and by then it was completely clear. The sound was definitely coming from under my sister's bed. I had a small flashlight, a pink plastic one, that I used when we played at reading under the covers, and I grabbed it with my hand shaking. I slowly got out of my bed, felt the floor was really cold, tiptoed and peeked down. Down there. There was, I swear to God, an old lady, a very skinny old woman with gray hair full of dirt. Her face looked as if she had been digging in mud. She was wearing some kind of black dress or robe, and her hands were so thin you could see the bones under her skin. She stared at me, eyes wide, laughing nonstop. It was such a terrible sight that I was frozen. I didn't even scream. I just felt like my legs wouldn't respond, like I was peeing myself. Afterwards, when I could breathe without thinking, I ran toward the stairs and went down screaming. Mrs. Junie was on the couch but wouldn't wake up. I shouted at her. I called her by her name several times. I shook her. I pulled her arm. And nothing. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a pitcher, and returned. I splashed water on her face, and she immediately opened her eyes, terrified. "What's wrong?" I said, already angry. I pointed upward, unable to speak properly. I think I was only saying there's someone under my sister's bed. She went up the stairs, still half angry. I waited and listened downstairs. A few seconds passed and I heard her scream. Then she ran downstairs without saying anything to me, took me by the hand, and led me to her house. That night I slept in her living room under a eucalyptus-scented blanket. She didn't let me go back until my parents arrived. When they came back, I was still shaking. I told her everything, and my mom went upstairs with my dad. They checked under the bed, and I remember very well that scream from my mom. They wouldn't let me upstairs, but I overheard their quiet conversation in the kitchen. When they said there was a lot of dirt there, like someone really dirty had hidden there, they said they found a little red cloth with something inside, a bone or something that looked like it. My dad put it in a bag and took it to the church, I think. He never told us where, he just told me not to worry about it anymore. I never heard anything else. No one wanted to talk about it. But a few days later, they put bars on all the windows, and since then, we've always left a lamp on in that house, even if it's a small one. I never found out who that old woman was who came into the house or what her intentions were. But when I think about her, the only thing I can think of is that she was a witch. Good evening, storytelling community in Uriel. I've followed the show for years, but never felt encouraged to share this story. Today, in October, the month of shadows and witches, I want to do it because it was exactly in October in 2019 when we experienced something that still gives us goosebumps to this day. My name is Jose, and even though I was there, I wasn't the one who suffered the worst that early morning of October 31st. The real protagonist was my older cousin, Pepe. He was the one who faced what we all later called the Witch of El Hulero. Every year we visit the family ranch around this time. It's a tradition. We celebrate Xantolo, remember those who are no longer with us and disconnect from everything. No signal, no internet, just the silence of the countryside, the crickets, and the wind among the orange trees. That day had been perfect. Laughter, hugs, stories, the sound of cups on the table. But when night fell, something changed. The atmosphere became colder. Everyone started getting ready to sleep. The house is at the end of a paved street, and behind it, acres of orange groves stretch out until the hills begin. There's just a stable and a few small buildings on the sides. The kitchen was separate from the rooms, resembling a small open house with walls only half a meter high. During the day, it feels cozy, familiar, but at night, the wind blows through everything and it feels like it breathes with you. The main house has 4 rooms and 2 baths. The women stayed in the center room, the biggest one. The lock on that door was broken, so they piled up suitcases against the entrance so the wind wouldn't push it open. My uncles and grandparents slept in the back, and we, Pepe, his brother Miguel, and I, slept in the room next to theirs. That one didn't have a door, just a thin curtain that moved every time the wind came in. We turned off the light around midnight. I was asleep close to the entrance, Miguel was in the middle, and Pepe was at the back. Everything was silent until something changed. Pepe says a cold breeze entered the room. so cold it ran down his back. He covered himself with the blanket up to his head, and then he heard a soft, childlike voice that said,
"Hello."
He heard my response to the greeting. He tensed, not recognizing the girl's voice, but pretended to sleep. The conversation continued. She asked me my name, and I told her. I asked her for hers, but Pepe couldn't quite catch it. Until that moment, he thought it was a joke, but then the girl spoke again.
"How old are you?"
I answered her. And then, with a voice that no longer sounded so childish, she said,
"I'm 150 years old."
Pepe's heart started beating really fast. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe well. He could only hear the heavy silence of the room. And then the voice asked,
"And the baby?"
"Where is she?" "I can smell her. She's close."
At that moment, Pepe tried to move, but his body didn't respond. Suddenly, he felt something fall on top of him. Thousands of long, cold hairs slid across his face. They covered his mouth, tangled around his neck, slipped between his lips. They were suffocating him. He tried to scream but couldn't. Then the voice changed again. It was no longer the voice of a little girl. It was that of an old woman, hoarse, dry, very close to him.
"I know there's a baby here. Tell me where she is,
Or I'll take you instead."
That baby was my sister. At that time, she hadn't been baptized yet. Pepe, barely able to move, raised his arm and pointed outside toward the distant houses, as if to divert attention. The voice said,
"I'm going over there. But if it's not there, I'm going to come back for you."
Suddenly the weight vanished, the hair loosened, and they were gone. The curtain at the entrance was suddenly lifted, as if something had rushed out of the room with a gust of air. Pepe sat up right away. He grabbed his cell phone. It was 5:40 in the morning. He turned on the light in the room. Miguel and I were still sound asleep. He tried to wake us up, but we ignored him. We told him, annoyed, to be quiet and let us sleep, thinking he was just playing around. Pepe stopped turning off the light. He refused to close his eyes for another second. At dawn, with the first rays of sunlight coming into the room, he went straight to the women's room. The baby was still there. My aunt, who is one of those people who can sense when something is strange, listened to him attentively. My mom also got worried as soon as she heard what had happened. And then my aunt told her side of the story. She said that around 3 a.m. she sensed something was off and realized someone was trying to open her door. Remember, the lock was broken and they had to push suitcases against the entrance to block it. Her daughter, my cousin, noticed it too because she was awake and saw her scared. My aunt told her to pray, assured her everything would be fine and to go to sleep. Soon they stopped struggling with the door. Things calmed down and they went back to sleep. I woke up around 9 when Pepe woke Miguel and me up with a nervous laugh. "How's your 150-year-old girlfriend?" he asked me. I thought he was joking. I went to wash my face, and when I came back, he started telling us everything. We laughed at first, but when we saw everyone's faces in the kitchen, when we realized that my mom and my aunt weren't there because they had gone out to get some things, we understood it wasn't a joke. My mom and aunt returned around noon. They brought candles, holy water, and herbs. They went through the whole house, and when they got to our room, they found in the corner where Pepe had slept several long hairs, old dry hairs. as if they had been kept there for who knows how long. They burned them without hesitation. Later that afternoon, we went back to the city. My mom and my aunt said they were afraid that it would come back, the thing that had arrived at dawn. And after that, we baptized my sister. We still celebrate Xantolo, lighting the bonfire and telling stories each October. But after that night, every time the 31st comes, no one sleeps in that room. No one. Today, for me, it's just another story, but for my cousin Pepe, it was a night he'll never forget. It would be great to hear this story on your podcast, and if you can, send a greeting to Pepe, who's currently working out of town. Wherever he is, does he still get chills remembering the witch from El Hulero? My dad Lucas has told me this story many times, each time differently. Sometimes it seemed like he wanted to forget it, and other times it was as if he needed to remember it to convince himself that it really happened. He grew up in a neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, back when there was still a lot of countryside, empty lots, and houses separated by trees. It was a place where kids spent all day outside, running around, hiding in tall grass, and searching for lizards among rocks. Until it started to get dark, because when the sun went down behind the hills, all the moms would come out and shout their children's names. "Lucas, dinner's ready. Fernando, come in." It was like an unwritten rule. When it got dark, everyone ran home. No one stayed outside. My dad said as a child he wasn't afraid of the countryside, trees, or woods. What scared him was that moment right when the sun started to set and everything filled with long shadows. He said that at that hour between day and night, sometimes they would see strange things, like that boy. He said the boy showed up nearly every day at the same time to watch them play. When they were already putting away the marbles or the toy cars, he would peek out from among the trees in the distance. He had long, very straight black hair and wore old, very wrinkled clothes. He never spoke. It even seemed like he couldn't, but he would wave at them with his hands, greeting them. He would gesture for them to follow him. They laughed. They would gesture for him to come over instead to play with them. But the boy would just shake his head and go back into the woods. Sometimes when they came back the next day, they would see him closer, almost among the bushes, as if he had been waiting for them. Weeks went by like that until one day, when it was just my dad and his friend Fernando, the boy appeared again. It was a dark, cloudy afternoon, and it seemed like a storm was coming, so the others wouldn't come play. The boy was there among the trees watching them. My dad said he didn't laugh that time and something was different in his eyes. It seemed different. Fernando was the first one to say it. What if we follow him? Just to see where he lives? My dad hesitated, but the boy made the gesture again slowly, as if he was waiting for them. He ran and they ran after him. The boy moves quickly and silently. They pass bushes, rocks, and loose dirt. My dad said they followed him closely but never caught up. He seemed to float among the branches. Suddenly, they saw him stop in front of a very small wooden house, half sunken among the trees. The door was half open, and inside you could see some orange lights like candles. There were no wires or light poles nearby. Lucas wondered if the boy lived with his parents and if they could ask them for permission so he could play. He took a step toward the door, but before he could knock, a scream stopped them. A man who was coming down the hill carrying firewood on his shoulders. When he saw them, he dropped everything to the ground and ran toward them, grabbed them firmly by the arms, one on each side, and started pulling them without saying a single word. After they had moved several meters away, only then did the man speak. He asked them what they were doing there, if they were crazy, and when my dad tried to explain that they were just following the boy who lived there, the man turned pale. "There's no boy here," he told them. "That's the witch's house." He told them that since his own grandfather was a child, that house had been there, inhabited by the same woman as always, who was always alone, who was always looking for company. The children didn't understand anything. They only knew that the man, a very old man, was trembling as he spoke. He accompanied them to the entrance of the neighborhood, to La Civilización. Before releasing them, he warned them, "If you see the boy again, run. But in the opposite direction, back to the village. Never go into the forest when he's there." My dad says that when he said him, the old man used air quotes with his hands as if he still couldn't believe it was really a child. That night, my dad didn't sleep. He said he couldn't get the boy's face out of his head, the way he looked at them from the house with an expression that no longer seemed playful. Years went by, the countryside filled up with houses, the streets were paved, and many new families came to live there. But that house on the hill was still there among the trees, small, with its sunken roof, its windows covered with rags. They said you could sometimes see a light inside, even though no one had ever seen anyone enter or leave. When my dad left the town in that neighborhood, already in his teenage years, they still kept saying that in the afternoons, when the sun began to set, you could see a boy among the trees. He didn't speak. He just watched those who were playing and gestured with his hand, as if inviting them to follow him. I've never been to that place, but when my dad tells me that part, I feel like it connects with a fear he never got over, one he'll never be able to completely forget. Community, as always, I want to remind you that I'll leave for you here in the episode description. Up next, we have a very, very special story. More than a horror story, it's a testimony. The testimony of what it's like to be a witch. We thank Graciela for the opportunity to share her experience. And if there's anyone else out there listening to us, a real witch, and you think we've said anything inaccurate here, we also invite you to share your version, your story. We continue with night stories. Hello, Uriel, and good evening, community. My name is Graciela P., and I live in the state of Mexico. This is the first time I've written something like this. Honestly, I'm a little nervous, but I also felt it was time to tell it. I've never said it out loud before, but yes, I am a witch. And it makes me laugh when I see so many people on the internet dressed in black, dancing with their pointy hats, their necklaces, and the famous witch's knot. Everyone talks about that knot as if it were the most powerful amulet that exists, but it only works for those who know how to wear it and truly have the gift. It's not protection as they make it seem, but balance. It's something that helps keep in harmony the elements that true witches can control. And yes, it has become popular, but I assure you that a prepared stone or even a well-chosen stick can protect you much more than that knot everyone shows off. Water has always been my strongest element. It speaks to me most clearly. Fire gives me what I ask for. The wind takes away what I want to get rid of. And the earth gives me energy. It rejuvenates my soul. But of all of them, water is the one that guides me. Sometimes I laugh when I see those people who call themselves witches and go around announcing it. We're not like that. The real ones don't dress in a special way, nor do we go around seeking attention. We're solitary, and though it sounds sad, love rarely works out for us. Somehow, we always end up alone. It's the fate of witches. That's why I would have loved for my story to come out on October 31st, because besides being my birthday, it's the witches' New Year, the night of the Sabbath. For us, that day marks the year's start, the night when anything possible or impossible could come true, when we can reach the beyond. I say us to mean those who don't announce themselves or post videos with spells or remedies. Those of us born with this. I, for example, was born while my paternal grandmother was celebrating her Sabbath with several other women. Though I was born far from her, we share the same lineage, and once she sensed my birth, she wanted to find and bless me. My mom, on the other hand, never got along with her. She knew what she was and was afraid of her. She promised not to see me until I was baptized, but my grandmother still found me. They say that when she saw me, she smiled and stroked my head for several minutes. My inheritance is from my father's side, and while I don't mind you saying my name, I'd prefer you not mention my last names. As a teacher, I know how many people listen to this podcast. Also, my grandmother was one of the most famous witches and still was in Oaxaca. Out of respect for the family, we will change her name, and I hope you will just call her Soledad. They say she had the power to turn into a ball of fire. As I said, I was born during one of her rituals on October 31st, when she, as the eldest of her group, announced that I would inherit her energy, her gift, that I would have it when she was no longer around. She gave the instruction to make sure I wasn't baptized. But that time, when my mom saw her holding me, when she touched my head so much, she got so scared that she took me immediately to the church and had me baptized right then. She thought that would free me, but it didn't. I already had that energy within me. My mom chose to move away from my grandmother with my dad and siblings, even though 3 months after that visit, after she finally met me, my grandmother passed away. They rented a small house, and later my father bought a piece of land in the middle of nowhere. That's why I say I live at the world's end. There was no water, no electricity, no sewage. My mom took care of the neighbors' materials, and that's how we made a living. I was just a baby, and they say I love being sat on the ground. That I would touch it for a long time in silence, as if I felt something in it, and that there was something very strange about my reflection in mirrors. That sometimes it looked blurry, that other times, when they saw me from afar, I simply didn't have a reflection. And one of my brothers even said that my reflection was standing while I was sitting. At 5 years old, I took care of my younger brother while my mother worked. That's how we kids were back then. The neighbors helped us, they turned on the lights for us or left us food. By age 7, I was already predicting things that later happened. I once warned my mom she'd fall at work and hurt her knees. And that's exactly what happened. A neighbor who was very fond of me once saw me playing under a pepper tree and told me I was getting prettier every day. Then she affectionately ruffled my hair, and I, without knowing why, I swear, yelled at her. I told her to say goodbye to her son because a friend was going to kill him. And that's exactly what happened that same day. I remember because they told me, and because the neighbor never looked at me the same way again, nor did she come near me or stroke my hair. She was afraid. Since then, my mom started taking me to church. She made me pray and asked me if I wanted to be a nun. She would say to me, "Wouldn't you like to wear a white dress like the nuns? Be close to God?" And I would just answer her, "No way, it's enough that you make me pray." I've never been rude. I don't use bad words because I believe that foul language drives spirits away, and most of them aren't bad. Their souls unaware they've already died. Over time, I learned to stay quiet when I started seeing the dead, especially when they talked to me, when I saw them coming toward the house. At first, I told my mom, but she got angry. She would say, "Stop talking about those things. Let them go. You'd better not pay attention to them." But I kept seeing things, seeing situations I couldn't explain. One time, a lady came looking for her missing daughter. Word had gotten around the neighborhood about what I did, and she approached me. When I was outside, when she didn't see my mom, she asked me about her daughter. I took her hands and told her to look in the dump, where there was a still smoldering burned tire, that she would find her there. And yes, that's where they found her. I don't recall how I knew, just that I told her. Another woman came to ask me for help because her son was sick. I told her that her son's girlfriend had given him something to eat and that in the cemetery on a grave there was a jar with his photo. They went, found it, and it was true. As a thank you, she gave me a pink coat. It was the nicest thing anyone had ever given me. But when my mother saw it, she thought I had stolen it and beat me until she was exhausted. No matter how hard I tried to avoid it, I began seeing dead people daily. Some spoke to me, while others just stared. I clearly remember once being followed down the street by one of them, and in desperation, I yelled for him to stop. He stopped dead in his tracks, and that day I realized they could also obey me. One night in a blackout, someone knocked 3 times on the door. When I opened the door, I saw a lady who asked me for water. I didn't let her in, but gave her a glass and watched her drink. Before she left, she told me, "I will never forget what you did for me." Over time, I started to investigate, to read, to understand why everything she said came true. When I was 15, I found out that I was a witch, but I also discovered that I wasn't the only one. That several women looked at me with hatred, with a hatred I didn't understand. I got married young, and it lasted 18 years. At 17, I met the man who became my husband. We had a family, but his jealousy complicated our relationship. During that tough time, I met Mrs. Juana, who knew about witchcraft. Whenever she saw me, she said I had a strong light and that women who looked at me with hate were witches. She claimed they sensed my energy shining brighter than theirs and envied me. Never let them touch you or spit on you, she told me, because they can steal what your grandmother left you. But that would be difficult. I didn't even touch people by the hand because I saw things, their memories, their pain. Witches like us see pain all the time. That's why my husband disliked that I avoided the cemetery, but he didn't realize some things there aren't visible to everyone. When I went, instead of visiting our graves, seeing and listening to my dead, I would just walk around. You have no idea how many times I found things buried among the graves, and all I did was take them out, return them, send the evil back to its source, undo the harm. You know, real witches don't expose themselves. That's why I laugh when I see some on social media showing off rituals. If they were real, they wouldn't do it. And, well, now I'm a much more mature woman. I have 3 children, and I feel like 2 of them inherited something. I don't know how much, but something. As a child, the oldest spoke with my grandmother and other spirits. My youngest, now in college, doesn't discuss energies with me, but I know she feels them too. I now live alone. Recently, I met a Christian who helped me become more spiritual. But on every full moon, my body starts to itch. I can't sleep, I don't eat meat, and I still don't shake hands. I like to walk barefoot at night, like when I was a child and I could feel the earth. I live in Chiconautla, on the land my father bought when we were children. I love solitude. Animals come up to me without fear. Some are just looking for company. I can tell when someone is lying or talking about me, good or bad. I know about herbs and remedies and learn what I don't know. If you ask who my best advisor is, it's the water. She brings me messages or gossip, as I jokingly say. Even though it's a cliche, I like black. I have an old soul. I've reincarnated several times, and in my last life I was Lucia, living in Jalisco with 3 children and a husband I deeply loved. When he died, I swore I'd find him in the next life, and believe it or not, I did. Now his name is Javier, but we arrived too late. He's married, and I don't intend to interfere. My companion spirit is the same woman I gave water to one night. She has never left me. She protects me, warns me, tells me who is coming and why. I'm not sure if that night I saw her as a child. She was still alive or already a spirit. If someone hurts me, I give it back to them. Before hugging a man, I'd rather hug a tree or a stone because they never lie. And yes, I've done bad things, and I've also returned what they've done to me. And before anyone asks, I don't have a shop, nor do I work for others. For me, those are trivial things. Of course, Uriel, I don't know if my story will ever come out. Maybe it's not a story for the night, but it's my life, and I wanted to tell you about it. But don't worry, because besides this, I have many other stories to tell. From my perspective, the ones I lived and the ones I witnessed. But they all end the same, because what I say and what I see always comes true. I've listened to night stories for years. I play it from the moment I get up while I'm getting ready for work and also when I come back home. Every time I do, I feel less alone. I'm with you, community. My dear community, before moving on to the next story, I want to remind you that we are absolutely against any kind of animal abuse to any of them. If you feel like you're being chased by a witch or a Nahual, transformed into something, just scare them off with some curse words or just deal with it. But never, never, never hurt a little animal. That's not something we do here in the Relatos de la Noche community. Please carry that message. Having said that, let's continue with the next story, with the revenge of the Nahual. Hello, Uriel. I've been listening to your podcast for 2 years. I've been interested in these topics since childhood, though there was a time I couldn't discuss them because of an experience I went through, which is probably a story for another time. Anyway, I was listening to your latest stories about witches, and I remembered a story my paternal grandmother told me when I was a child. I'd like to share it. She passed away 4 years ago, and in some way I feel that by telling it, I would be honoring her memory. My grandmother told us she had a mare whose mane was braided by goblins at night, or that on the beach near her house you could watch a rider gallop until vanishing into the sea. But among all her stories, there was one in particular that she told with great sorrow, because it was about the last year of her father's life, my great-grandfather. My grandma grew up in a communal land bordering the states of Tabasco and Veracruz. I'll tell you, but I ask you to leave out the name of that town because of the acquaintances who still live there. My grandma's family traded coconut, cacao, and corn. They had plots for these crops as well as livestock and poultry, and the biggest house in the area made entirely of wood. She told us that a year before her father passed away, a kind of very large white vulture started to appear, about the size of a person, always on top of a shed. It had feathers so white they seemed to shine. Every night without fail when my great-grandfather came home, that animal would start to sing. After a few days, my great-grandmother warned him to be careful, saying it wasn't normal. She insisted he see the community priest, and my great-grandfather, though skeptical, agreed. When they arrived, the priest watched him closely and said what followed him wasn't just an animal, but something between this world and another. He had to use a blessed silver bullet to shoot them. And following his instructions, my great-grandfather had 2 silver bullets made. Once they were blessed with water from the chapel's baptismal font, he got ready to act. One night, with his 2 eldest sons, he hunted that bird. One of my uncles shot it, and my grandmother said she saw the animal fall from the roof into some bushes. However, when they looked for it, all they found were the crushed branches, as if something very heavy had fallen there. But there was no trace of the animal. That night, that bird didn't come back, and my great-grandfather thought that annoying visitor had either run away or maybe died, so he decided to go on with his life as usual. A week later, my great-grandfather went to town. When he left the community store, he ran into a man who had been living there for less than 2 months. Weeks earlier, that man had asked my great-grandfather for a job, but he said there were no positions since his sons and daughters ran the business. Seeing him, the man, visibly upset, said to him, "You screwed me, Julian, and now I'll do the same to you." My great-grandfather noticed that the man had a bandage on his right arm and that his leg was injured as if he had suffered a fall. However, he calmly replied that he didn't owe him anything, that he didn't even know him, and the man just smiled strangely and walked away. Days later, my great-grandfather began to experience a simple and annoying hiccup. At first, he didn't think much of it, but the hiccup persisted and wouldn't go away with any home remedy. It became constant, permanent, with no clear cause or explanation. Worried, he went to doctors all over the region, but they couldn't find the reason either. He even underwent tests to rule out serious illnesses like cancer, but all the results showed he was in good health. With every appointment, test, and trip, the family started facing financial difficulties. My great-grandfather began selling his land, his cattle, and other belongings, until he was left with just the cheese press and a few chickens. My uncles and my grandmother agreed to take him to the United States to see a specialist, but he passed away a few days before they could make the trip. When the news of his death and the family's suffering spread through the community, rumors began. They said the man who threatened my great-grandfather was a Nahual who wanted to take everything from him. Also, after that threat, no one ever saw that man in the community again. No explanation was ever found for my great-grandfather's strange illness. It seemed like a vengeful curse, a kind of punishment that man, maybe a resentful Nahual, had cast upon him. But before I say goodbye, let me tell you one more story. My grandmother also recalled a unique experience with her father, my great-grandfather, after he died. The night after my father was born, my grandmother was breastfeeding him. At that time, people often put canopies over beds to keep mosquitoes away. Suddenly, the canopy lifted up, and my grandmother saw, to her astonishment, her father, my great-grandfather. She was shocked, as he had died 2 years before. He calmly told her he came to meet his grandson and asked to hold the baby. Though my grandmother was confused, she handed him over. She said that my great-grandfather took the baby in his arms, looked at him tenderly, kissed him on the forehead, and blessed him. Before leaving, he told my grandmother, "Don't be sad for me anymore, my daughter. I'm resting, but I will always take care of you and your children." He gave it to the boy. And then the canopy gently fell again, and my grandma was left there, not fully understanding what had just happened. Thank you for reading me and for making these stories like my grandma's last. I ask you, please, to change my great-grandfather's name. I wanted to tell you the story just as my grandma told it to me, and I believe in these things, in things that exist beyond our understanding. I wouldn't want any descendant of that Nahual or the Nahual himself to come after my family or me. Like my mom says, the best thing to do with dice is not to play them. Again, thank you very much for reading me. Hello, Uriel. Hello, community. Before time gets the best of me, just like in previous years, and taking advantage of the courage I have today, I'm writing this anecdote. I don't expect you to believe me. I know what we saw, even if I wish it would go away, is something that can stop coming to my mind for a while. But it's not going to leave me. I'm Fabs, and what I'm about to tell you happened in 2020, exactly on October 31st. I know it sounds like a movie, but it's real and happened because of me. It began a few days earlier, in October during the pandemic. As a teenager stuck at home, I was obsessed with the paranormal. My family has always had stories like these, and I can share more later if you'd like. I became especially interested in witches. Through one of the stories on the channel, I found out that in my father's hometown, where we still have family, there are a lot of stories about witches. They say that you can even see them on a hill over there. I asked my dad, and he told me some anecdotes about it. I bravely suggested we go see them, and my dad became serious and responded, "You don't play with that." But of course, I didn't listen to him. I spent all week saying we should go. I made jokes about witches and didn't treat the topic as seriously as it deserves. It's easy to mock something you haven't faced yourself. I used to say that if a witch appeared, she'd find out who she was dealing with, and I'd fight her. Like my dad would say, I was challenging them. Luckily for me, one of our uncles invited us to his house on the 31st. We accepted, obviously. We were going to see my cousins and get out of the house for a while, which that year was almost impossible. The entire way, I kept repeating that if a witch appeared, I'd tell her off and didn't care, laughing the whole time. Challenging them? We arrived at my uncle's house. The town was beautiful, even though it had nothing. There was a unique peace you only find in such places. The house was on a quiet street, and the next street led to an alley that went straight to the edge of one of the hills surrounding the place. The afternoon was a typical quiet family gathering. After eating, my uncles and parents discussed topics about the grandparents. We, my cousins, my sister, and I asked for permission to go out. We were already grown up, but since our little cousin was 5, we were supposed to watch her, so they let us go out to play, like we said. We decided to go to the corner of the alley where they could still see us from the house, but where we also had more space to run. We were having fun. We lost track of time, and before we knew it, it was already around 7 and it was already dark. On the other corner, there were some kids with sheets and dark glasses, the typical ghost costume that was popular that year. They had a speaker and were taking pictures. They were teenagers like us, so we didn't mind. Until something was heard that didn't fit the atmosphere. It was like a wail, something like an ah, somewhere between a moan and a cry. Very similar to typical La Llorona audio. My first thought was that they had played that on the speaker to scare my cousin, the little girl. It was Halloween. I turned to look at them, ready to call them out for the prank, but it couldn't have been them. They were even more scared than we were. They grabbed their things and ran straight home. It was weird, but I figured they just pretended to be scared because we caught them. We kept playing since it was Halloween night. It could have just been a prank, right? But a few minutes went by and we heard it again. It wasn't a wail anymore. Now it sounded more like a woman's scream, loud but distant, a sound that left all of us paralyzed. We looked at each other to confirm that we had really heard it, and yes, it was real, it was there. We were scared, but we didn't want to show it. We tried to ignore it, tried to find an explanation, and it could have been anything. That's what we thought. We kept playing, or at least we tried, but the sound kept being heard, farther and farther away, but still there, as if it wanted us to know it was still there. At that moment, we were playing stop. You put a foot in the center, say a country, and run away, you know. It was my turn to run. I ran toward the mouth of the alley. I looked down at the ground because my shoe was untied and I didn't want to fall. And when I looked up toward the alley, what I saw left me completely frozen. My hearing faded. I stopped listening to my cousins. I stopped feeling my body. It was as if all the blood drained to my feet, as if my chest tightened and my heart shrank. I felt an intense cold throughout my body. I blinked several times as if to wake up, thinking it was my imagination. At the end of the alley, in the darkest part, there was a tall figure. It looked like a woman. She was wearing a long black dress that reached the floor with a high collar and long sleeves. Her hair was very long, falling over her shoulders. Her face was covered by a veil, as if she were in mourning. The little I could see underneath was pale, expressionless. And the eyes, I couldn't see the eyes because there were none. Because there was only black, an absolute black that made me feel that gaze down to my bones. It could be a costume, yes, a very well-made one, but there was one detail. That thing, whatever it was, had no feet. That thing floated about 10 centimeters above the floor, completely still, looking straight at me. I backed away without turning around until I reached my sister. She asked me what that was. I told her I didn't know, amazed that she was seeing it too. We couldn't speak properly. We couldn't even think. When I tried to look away, something drew me back. It was already closer. It was getting closer slowly, floating and without moving. And here I want to pause on this because people always ask, why didn't you run? Why didn't you leave? It's very simple because real fear paralyzes you. Real fear is the worst feeling in the world, the fear of death, the fear of not understanding what you're seeing. It makes you completely useless. I felt like she had complete control over me. I couldn't stop looking at her. I couldn't move. I couldn't run. I couldn't do anything. Until I heard my mom's voice calling us, saying, "Girls, let's go now." And then it was like I was unfrozen. As soon as I heard her, I was able to run. I dashed toward the house. I ran like never before in my life. I could swear that thing was coming after me. I felt like I was never going to make it to the house, even though it was just 3 houses away. When I saw my mom, the only thing I wanted to do was hug her and cry. I literally wanted to prove that I was human, that I was still here, that I didn't belong to fear or to her. But before I could start crying, I thought, is she going to scold me? I got into the truck, covered myself with the blanket we always bring just in case, and stayed quiet. It was already around 9. I didn't even want to look at the road. I didn't want to look out the window. I felt like if I turned around, I'd see her, as if she was still with us, even though she was gone. We got home and my mom asked me why we were so quiet. My sister and I were in shock. I could only think about what we had seen and I couldn't speak. I couldn't even imagine trying to explain to my mom what we had just seen. My mom turned on the television and a Legends special was on. Then the story of La Llorona started and they played her wail. And it was at that moment, up until that moment, that I broke down, that I started crying, that I told my mom everything between sobs. I apologized to her for not listening. I told her that I knew I had brought it on myself, that I had provoked it, that it was my fault for challenging the witches. My mom told us, "Oh, girls, that's what happens when you go where you weren't invited. What were you doing there anyway?" She gave us milk, waited for us to calm down, and sent us to bed. My sister and I shared a room. It faced the street on the second floor, and we couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her and her black eyes full of hatred. I knew she was looking at me. My mind just kept repeating that she was coming for me. Several times we heard knocks on the window that night. We swore she was outside, that she had found us, that she was there. I don't remember much of what happened that week. I just remember that I couldn't sleep, that I kept dreaming about her. My mom says that at night I cried, that I seemed out of it, that even though I swore I was asleep, she says I wasn't, that I didn't want to eat, that I didn't want to do anything. Before the week was over, I already looked very haggard, tired, skinny, my mom says. They took me to an aunt who heals. I should mention that she is from the same town where we saw that, but now she lives here. My mom told her what we saw, that at that moment we thought it was La Llorona because of the wailing, and my aunt told us the following. That wasn't La Llorona, that is a witch, a damn witch. She saw you, Tiernita, and with the light you carry, she wanted to suck it from you. She latched onto you because you challenged her. These ones get very angry when challenged, but she'll see soon. My aunt cleansed me with 1,000 things. She put something on my neck and I swear I felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, a weight I didn't even know I was carrying until that moment. Afterward, I slept better, but never wanted to return to that town. And believe me, never, never again would I make fun of something I don't understand. Because maybe I won't see them again. But now I know that they did see me, and maybe they still know who I am and where I am. Thank you very much. I hope you can choose my story. Feel free to modify it as you wish. You have no idea how much you've kept me company during my sleepless nights on road trips and throughout these 7 years. Thank you, Uriel. Thank you, community. Have a happy Halloween night. Community, it's time to look at the screen because the winners of the latest raffles are appearing. Remember that if your name is appearing on the screen right now, you have to write to miralatodelano@gmail.com and share your username there so we can tell you how to get your autographed book. Happy Halloween, happy Witches Night. Keep an ear out for noises outside tonight.